Alright, welcome back here to our little video series on working with databases on IONOS.com web hosting. This is our third video, I think, of the series so far. There'll probably be 2 or 3 more. The previous videos, we created a new database on IONOS web hosting, showed how to connect to that with PHP, and then we also went into that database using PHPMyAdmin, and all of this is built right into IONOS. .com web hosting. So today we are going to take a look at what we set up the last 2 videos, and then also we are going to change the tables we created in the previous videos just a little bit, and then we're going to look at doing a data import from a CSV file, so we don't have to manually add all the entries we're going to be working with in future videos. You'll see how that goes, and we're going to do that by creating the data in Excel, exporting as a CSV file, and then importing into the database with PHPMyAdmin. So where I'm at right now, I just logged into our IONOS hosting, IONOS.com, login, username, password. I'm just going to bounce into hosting here, and then we're going to view our database. Quickly go over what we set up in the past, and then we're going to make 1 or 2 small changes to it after the last video. I thought of 1 or 2 things I wish I had done differently. So on IONOS, with this everything being hosted, you can see we're pretty quickly into our database on PHPMyAdmin, which is a very simple PHP-based database management tool. If you're familiar with SQL Server Management Studio, this would be similar, but quite a bit different to that. So in the last video, we created these 2 tables. We've got an artist table, meaning song artist, so a band or a singer or something like that. You'll see we manually created these 2. And then we also created this album table. So this album table matches the band's albums or records to the artist. So the things I did want to change here, this release year doesn't really make sense that we had set it up as a date time if all we care about is the release year. So I figured this would be a good way to show how to change data types. So from the structure of this table, we can see release year, currently date time. All we've got to do is hit change. From date time, we can go to date. So it should let us do that just fine. So now this is going to be looking for a 4-digit, numerical value integer. But it will be a date, so you could do other date functions with it. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to add an album art column to this. And we are going to do that by going to add 1 columns, and here, where do we want to put it? Maybe we will put it right after artist ID. So it's going to show up between artist ID and title. This doesn't really matter. It does if you're depending on how you're doing your import. So we'll just call it album art. Variable character, meaning it can be pretty much any characters you want within the collation of the table, which we won't get into for that. For this video. So the length default, we're going to let it be up to 80 characters. In default, let's just set it null. So by default, it'll just be completely empty. Not even an empty string, just almost non-existent. So now we've got our release year fixed. I'm kind of surprised these are 0000-0000. So let's take a look. Oh, that's right. Yeah, so it's year, month, date. 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit date. What we took off was the... Oh, I did it wrong again. Let me go back in here. Change. So instead of date, we're going to do year. This should give us, I hope, the 4 digits that we care about. Yep, so we release year. It's all zeros. Album art is all null. So you'll see we've got a bunch of fields that aren't right here. So what we're going to do is run a query to delete this table entirely. So we can just delete from album where 1, it will always be true. We can simulate the query. You're going to see it's going to match 22 rows, so it's going to affect 22 rows, and because it's a delete, it's going to delete 22 rows, which is fine. That's what we wanted. So we're going to take a look at, we got album ID, artist ID. You see we had 22 rows before. We don't really want to re-add all of those. So what we're going to do is a data import. And we're going to leave this table alone. I am going to do a I'm going to call it an extended cut of this video, where we wipe out all the tables, do one import that regenerates into these two tables. But we're not going to look at that now. But if you're interested in how something like that might work, how you can import one flat file and then very easily normalize it would be the proper term, with foreign keys, primary keys, things like that. So we're going to leave this table alone. Album art is wiped. And we are going to look at creating a text file or a CSV file with the data that we want, so we can import it using PHPMyAdmin to repopulate the data with all the fields we want. So what we're going to do is first we are going to, and I had done some of this ahead of time, we're going to take a look at how the data looks in Excel. So if you think of a database table, it's kind of like an Excel worksheet. You can mimic it very closely. You're not going to be able to do the same things, but it's going to look a lot like this. So here we have album ID, artist ID, album art. So here you see we have kind of a discrepancy on where this column is. So in our data, we have it after release year. So what I can do is I can either go into Excel, move this after album, so album title, so when, or actually after artist ID. So when we do our import, the columns match. Or I kind of like the layout of the Excel file better. We got the artist, the album title, the release year, then the album art. So if we want to get the album art after release year, we will need to reorganize the table over here. So I believe it is in structure and move columns. So they give you this nice, easy to use tool where we can just do that. So now we got artist ID, title, release year, album art. Artist ID, title, release year, album art, and then created date time. I always put created date time last, so we're just going to leave that there. We're going to hit go, and you can see the columns have been moved successfully. So now with the columns in the right order, we have 6 columns. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. We are pretty close to this being ready for import. So a couple things we're going to look at that might look weird. This album ID says null. We're going to leave this as null. When it inserts, remember the primary key is going to do an auto increment. So this will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In our case, it'll probably pick up where the last rows left off. So it'll probably say something like 43, 44, 45, but we'll see that. Artist ID, this is an integer that maps to our artist table. So all of the artist ID 1 is the Killers. Artist ID 2 is Taylor Swift. This can be a pain to map if you have a lot of data sets with a lot of different values. If we had 1,000 songs and 100 artists, this would have been a pain. There's a much easier way to do that, which I'll show in another video. I'm going to call that part of an extended cut because it is kind of detailed. It gets into some SQL scripting, but we'll take a look at that. If it's currently March 2025, so if you look by April 2025, that video will probably be there. Release year, I think these were accurate. These are the year the release of the album. Album art, so these just reference images. So what I did, and this was a little tedious too, is I just went out and downloaded the album art. So we're just going to take all these pictures, upload them to a folder on our web space. So it will be in an images/album art folder, and then we store the file name in the database, and then we just use HTML to reference the file name based on what comes back from our database queries, and we'll see how all that shakes out as well. And then we have our created date time, which again looks a little goofy in that it just says current timestamp. So if I were to enter a date here, Excel is going to format it weird. I don't want to get into messing with how Excel is going to format it. So I just create a placeholder. Once we get it into Excel, we are going to do a find and replace to put the date we want. There's probably a better way to do this by having a default date time in PHPMyAdmin, but I'm not going to bother looking into that now. So I'm just going to copy current timestamp because that's what we're going to search on. So to get this into CSV, all we have to do is File, Save a Copy. It's going to ask where we want to put it. We are going to change its format to CSV. So I'm going to call this Artist List Updated. And then I'm just going to put it in the root of our site folder here. So if we were to bounce out and go to db.10minutewebdev.com, you'll see the site we're working in. I don't know what will be there. We'll see at the end of these videos. But this is just where it's going to store that file. So I am just going to hit save. it should save as a nice CSV file. All right, now we're going to bounce out to the view the file that we just saved. You'll see it's Microsoft Excel. It says comma separated, I assume. Let's go to open with. Let's edit in Notepad++. If you don't have that, I would also recommend downloading that. So here you'll see the data. I'm going to make it a little bigger. Here's the data we exported. We got null, we got the artist ID, we got everything we thought and hoped we would. And then we got this current timestamp field. So what we're going to do, you see that's in almost every row. We're going to do a find and replace. So Control F, replace. We're going to find this. We're going to replace with, and we can give it anything we want. So let's just create it. Say it was created March 1st, 2025 at midnight UTC. So if I go replace all, now we've got this field, which our database field will accept. So we are going to do that. And there's an option to do an import where you tell PHPMyAdmin that the first row is the column headers. I never use that. I would just delete it. So I tried to save it. It gave me an error. I'm just going to put it in a new file and see if it lets me save that. So it should let me save that. I'm going to call it final import artist album list.csv. So this normal text file we're going to change to CSV. If we set it to all types, we can just use .csv and then it's going to inherit that. So we're going to do that. So now we got our data. That looks pretty good. So now all we have to do, and here's where if your import doesn't work the first time, just go back, take a look at your data. It's usually something with commas because we're using commas as a delimiter. If any of our album titles had a column, we would then have 7 columns in that row and bad things would happen. But to do an import, we would just go to the table, album table. You'll see it's empty. We go to import. We can choose the file. So I believe it is this one. Looks like, yeah, I created right now. And now here it's going to figure out the format, CSV. Then it's going to ask us to do some things. So specify things like column separated with. Column separated with comma, that's good. Columns enclosed with double quotes. We didn't use double quotes, I'm going to delete it. Columns escaped with. They put double quotes. That isn't really what we want. I could take this out completely, or I usually do a backslash. So if you had your columns enclosed with quotes and you had a quote in your column, you would prefix the quote within the column with this backslash. That tells the system to not treat that quote as the terminating quote. Lines terminated with auto. This is just going to detect where the system thinks our lines are terminated with auto would work. That would probably auto also work. /r/n carriage return line feed. I'm just going to hit Control-Z a bunch of times and get back to auto. Column names we're not going to specify. So we've got our data, we got our parameters, we're going to hit go. We're going to cross our fingers and it looks like it worked. So 20 queries executed. If I were to go browse, here we have all our data. We got the proper release year, we got the album art, we got the created date we chose, we got the title of the album, and we have the referenced artist IDs. And again, these point back to the artist table. So just like that, this would have inserted thousands of records in a few seconds. It did 20 records in next to no time at all. So that is how we do a database table import. For our use case today, I think that's as far as we're going to go. Now that we've got good data, we've got everything we need. The next video, I think we'll probably be working either querying this data directly in PHPMyAdmin, which we'll probably start, and then we will bust out and go into PHP and build a web page around all this data in a mini content management system that will let us manage this music catalog. So that will do it for right now. Check back a few days for the next video in this series. And always, like and subscribe.